Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. In today's episode, we hand over the reins to Pregnancy Help News to take a deeper dive into the legislative and policy changes we're already seeing from the new administration. We hope you've been enjoying our monthly Pregnancy Help News briefs and their coverage of and for the pregnancy help community. Pregnancy Help News reports on the pregnancy help community for the pregnancy help community. Back from the March for Life with lots to share is Pregnancy Help News Managing Editor Lisa Bourne. So let's jump right in.
It is so good to be here with Jor-El Godsey and Andrea Trudden here, are my colleagues at Heartbeat International. I was on the ground with our president, Jor-El, at the March for Life. The 2025 March for Life was so amazing, and there's always so many things to talk about there. But Jor-El and I, we accompanied each other to a couple of events, but we also kind of went our separate ways. So we did a little bit of dividing and conquering.
Yeah, Lisa, I'm surprised. I didn't see you at all, and I don't know how you didn't find me. I was the one with the sign.
That's just how big the crowd was and how many packed in to see our new president and vice president. And we had a lot of pro-life lawmakers come up onto that rally stage. It's always great to see lawmakers that support life, but this March rally was again historic for it having been Vice President Vance's first public appearance since being sworn in. And then also we had the leaders of both the chambers in the Congress, John Thune and Mike Johnson, showing up. That's the first time for that as well. And then President Trump had a recorded message. So I was on the ground for that. I don't know if you were able to hear any of it because you were holding that sign waiting for folks to catch up with you.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really, we were grateful it got into the 30s during that time because it had been much colder earlier in the week, as we know, for the inauguration and all of that. And it was quite the buzz for the entire week. But what a way to finish the week with a great March for Life and to see some particularly important faces that were on the stage and speaking to the crowd and taking the leadership that we hope that we trust and hope that they will continue not just to say more things, but to do many good things.
Absolutely. And I know that the crowd connected quite a bit with Vice President Vance. He stepped around that bulletproof glass a time or two to wave at people and really try to connect. That was telling. That was very telling. And President Trump, like you say, they can say things, but I'm inclined at this point to take him at his word. He referenced how cold it was, and towards the end, he also invoked life being made by our Creator, but he also acknowledged everybody was standing out in the cold and said that our hearts were warm. So I think he's coming along, and we'll take that. And there were other events too, obviously, alongside. There's always quite a few. We got to see Paul Vaughn speak, one of the pro-life advocates that had been pardoned at a reception with Thomas More Society. They are representing him. And then we also attended Alliance Defending Freedom's reception, which these are great partners that we have with our own situations in courts and such. But just wins across the board. Where do we even start?
Well, yeah, so many things. Plus we were really responding to the flurry of executive orders that started on day one and were continuing throughout the week. Of course, excited for the pardoning of those that were we feel unjustly prosecuted or persecuted, maybe even is a better word. But let's start with funding. There were some immediate things, and this is where every transition between the polarized parties that we have, I always want to say this: pro-life should not be something that is really only the purview of one party. Both parties should honor and respect life and work towards making sure that women are not feeling like they're forced into abortions. But unfortunately, it's become a very partisan thing. And so when we see the change of administrations, we see kind of the pendulum swing. So the good news was the pendulum swung fast back in favor of some key funding things, one of which is what we would call the Mexico City policy. And that really relates to funding that goes to international programs and sources and funding that goes to other governments, specifically. The Mexico City policy was to prevent that from going to outside of the U.S. for funding of abortion and related services in other countries. And this may not feel like a direct pregnancy help impact, but it is. And the impact there is like, look, it's our friends that are in countries in Africa for which a very aggressive Biden administration and a Democratic administration before him have been using abortion funding to really leverage into policy conversations and constitutional conversations for other countries, strongly Christian countries in Africa in particular, Latin America, have been subject to this kind of like policy bullying using abortion money for that. So the good news is Trump comes in, reverses that, and it goes back to even stronger Mexico City policy that he implemented when he was first in office the last time. And then with that was the Hyde Amendment, which is something else. Now, so Mexico City policy is international money. Hyde Amendment goes towards domestic money. So in my mind, these things connect. And so the good thing is that the government is being pushed out of these. Someone said that, it costs Planned Parenthood like $60 million domestically with just the stroke of a pen for that executive order. Like, that's good because this is money that goes to help the abortion industry compete for her as she's making that decision about an unborn child. So that's how it connects to pregnancy help, is it takes away some of the ammunition that they have in their predatory practices for their industry of abortion, chemical abortion, and the like. At the same time, it gives us a little bit more of a level playing field when we're trying to compete for her heart, her attention, that helps us a little bit. And it certainly helps our international friends who are trying to do the same in their countries where the incidence, say, of international Planned Parenthood has been really weighing heavily into what they're trying to do. So it might be like, this is a pro-life win, yes, but it's also, there is some connection to the pregnancy help world as well in these funding, these executive orders that address abortion funding on behalf of the American taxpayer. Like, these are things we shouldn't be doing anyway. Thankful for the Trump administration to do it and do it well.
Absolutely. We shouldn't be exporting abortion or funding it, whether here or overseas. And it does affect our pregnancy help organizations because it's just, it's flying right in the face of what they're trying to do in providing life-affirming services to women. So Jor-El, you've spoken in the last couple months a time or two about perhaps pregnancy help folks don't want to be political, but you kind of need to be at least to the point of being informed. And so this is so important for people to understand the implications of putting the Hyde Amendment back into force and also the Mexico City policy. So it's good that we're helping people to understand that, because we also know that government documents can make a person go cross-eyed maybe.
Absolutely.
Some days. So Andrea, you're with us as well, and there's so many wins, like we said, on the list. But how about the FACE Act and the calls for repeal there? That's another policy thing that it looks like the Trump administration has indicated that they are going to stop the weaponization of government toward the pro-life advocates, if you will, that are praying outside centers, and then also bring the perpetrators to justice. That promise was made from the rally stage as well, that have been attacking pregnancy centers since the leak of the Dobbs decision. So what are your thoughts to that end?
Yeah, it's been very interesting to just see how this administration has come out and come fast to help bring back those common sense elements of our nation. Going back real quick, I mean, it's a fact that most Americans do not want to fund abortion, and they have said that in surveys from both sides of the aisle. So the fact that we're able to really hit that head on is really affirming. But yes, we've seen over the past several years the weaponization of the different departments in regard to the FACE Act. In particular, you mentioned the pardoning of the 23 pro-life Americans. That was something that they used the FACE Act against us while not doing anything in regard to those hundreds of pregnancy centers, pro-life organizations, and churches that had been vandalized after the Dobbs decision, after the Dobbs leak occurred back in 2022. And even going back before that, Jor-El and I were chatting earlier, and it reminded me the fact that in the FACE Act, pregnancy help organizations are specifically identified as reproductive health facilities that allows them to have the same protections in those cases. So by all measures, they should be held at least equally, whereas we know people have been subjected to prison time for praying outside of an abortion facility or being a sidewalk advocate, which is simply unacceptable. And it was really affirming to hear the fact that this administration is making the declaration they are going to investigate the violence against pregnancy help organizations. But it is an interesting act to begin with. And I'm going to punt it over to Jor-El to kind of get into the FACE Act a little bit more, because we do have a position on this and it is something that we want to share.
Yeah, and for those of you that are not aware of really what the FACE Act is, it is called the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances. It was actually kind of came about in the mid to late 90s, and it was really what served to end the Operation Rescue protest movement, which I was involved in back in the 80s, got arrested a couple times before I ever even knew about pregnancy centers. But it was what was leveraged to then make these things a federal felony, right? That's one of the issues, and one of the ways that the Clinton administration at the time, and then others since then and certainly the Biden administration, have used it to go against those that would have anything to do with the access to abortion clinics. So as Andrea mentioned, the win here has been that for pregnancy centers is that we have been qualified as a reproductive health facility under the FACE Act. But overall, the FACE Act has been really used as a bludgeon against our pro-life brethren who are inclined towards more direct, peaceful protests against abortion clinics. And so it's been used to, I mean, some of the folks that were pardoned, they had no other track record of any arrests, and yet they were handed 2 and 3 and 4 year sentences. It was just the on balance, this FACE Act was being used to really persecute versus as well as prosecute peaceful pro-lifers. Even as we watched pregnancy centers and pro-life offices and churches be vandalized in the wake of, even before the Dobbs decision, right, in the leak that occurred as well. So over 100 of those, half a dozen pregnancy centers were actually firebombed. And all of that, we've only had actually four convictions. Most of those were in the state of Florida. So on balance, and we were even asked there was some of our friends in Washington reached out to us and asked, well, what did the pregnancy centers think? And this is where we jumped in and said, yeah, this is on balance, this needs to be repealed. Maybe it could be replaced with something that is much more appropriate for pregnancy help organizations and pro-life organizations. But at the very least, it should be taken out of the hands of a DOJ that has proven to date that they're just going to use it mostly against pro-lifers. So our position that we've encouraged is that, yes, this should be repealed. We're grateful for Chip Roy jumping on that as soon as he did in this new administration. We hope that the Senate will be as equally interested in doing so.
Well, and also on this long list of pro-life wins, it appears that the Trump administration is going to be undoing a recategorization of abortion as health care on the part of the Biden administration. So who's not celebrating that?
I think that's just another sample as to how they were finding every way to get as much money to push toward abortion and to promote abortion as they could. So we're really grateful for these, the rescinding of the Biden administration's executive orders this past week.
So, and it included use of Medicaid funding to pay for travel costs for elective abortions. So I would argue that similar to the colonization, if you will, overseas, that's exploiting women here that may be, living with poverty and think they can't have their baby and, Medicaid's going to take care of my abortion. So that's a welcome change back in the other direction. It's
a great point, Lisa, because it's just such a curious dichotomy. As the Biden administration moved to try to force that understanding that abortion is healthcare, meanwhile they've been doing everything they can to demedicalize the provision of chemical abortion, like no more doctor's visits, fewer FDA regulations. We really don't care about the actual health of the women. We just care about her being able to access the abortions we're trying to peddle. So that was such an odd scenario for them to try to legitimize it more at the same time as they're actually actively delegitimizing what we already know is an illegitimate practice as far as the abortion is concerned. So that's a good call out.
Yeah, I will say personally, every time I hear the term abortion care, it does make my skin crawl as a woman. So, Andrea, there's some other international wins that we have seen from the new administration. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, this administration has now led us back and led a coalition of countries as well as led us back into signing on to the Geneva Consensus Declaration. So this affirms women's health. It affirms families. And we had the opportunity a couple of years ago. I got to go with my colleague, Ellen Felt, our international specialist, to the UN and actually talk about how pregnancy help affirms the Geneva Consensus Declaration, because we are there on the ground helping women, helping families, setting them up for success. And this has already been in the Republican platform that they are going to be very pro-family and find policies that encourage families. So this was one very swift way that they could show that through their actions. And it's very disappointing that so many countries are not signed on to this. This was when we were there at the UN. The representative from Guatemala was talking about how the countries were literally being bullied by funding. So if you wanted money from another country, you could not sign on to this pro-family declaration. And it was very unfortunate. We got to hear our friend Valerie Huber from the Institute of Women's Health speak to this, pointing out the ways that pregnancy help is there to empower women and lift up families so that they actually can get out of a cycle of poverty and learn new ways to get, as a family, build up the communities, because strong families build strong communities. And that is a win for everybody, including the nation that was refusing to sign on.
So I know we've talked about the 23 pro-life activists being pardoned, but I want to touch on that again. It's just galvanized the whole movement. Everyone, whether you know someone personally that or not, you might know someone who knows one of them directly. It's just brought us all together, I would argue, on one level. But these people, they take time out of their personal life on a regular basis to go pray for life. And, above and beyond what a lot of us do. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I'm not out in front of a facility every week or daily like some of these folks are. And they're very busy. They have families. True devotion to praying and witnessing to life, all of them peaceful, whether or not they were on the outside of the facility or not, just praying. And, it begs the question, like, even if they weren't incarcerated, because not all of them were, the heavy-handed SWAT team coming in and terrorizing families with small children, why do you, and this could go for either Andrea or Jor-El, why do you think these folks were targeted in the first place, and why with such vehemence?
It's a great question. Part of it is when I hear the words weaponization, sometimes I don't really know what that means. I think sometimes it made me feel like it's overused, or it's hyperbole. And then I see what actually happened with these particular individuals. When I was at a meeting before the March for Life, I got to sit next to my good friend Chris Bell of Good Counsel Maternity Homes in the New York, New Jersey area, a longtime pro-lifer who's married to Joan Bell, who was one of these individuals. And they were very excited for the possibility. When we were sitting together, they were very hopeful. The word had not quite come down yet at that point when we were together. So it was a delight to know that she was pardoned. They were reunited after the extended period of time. And that is when I understand that, yes, the DOJ had been weaponized against pro-lifers, that they were heavy-handed in how they did it. These individuals were overcharged. And it seemed like they had become really the Biden administration's tool to frighten and intimidate other pro-lifers from doing the kind of things that you were talking about, Lisa, about peacefully protesting on the sidewalk. We all know the story of Mark Houck and how he was basically the FBI, Paul Vaughn, same thing. Groups that looks like SWAT shows up at their house, banging on the door, demanding that they present themselves and then to be arrested. Like, these are the tactics of intimidation and threat that show you how what should be the Department of Justice can then be used in a negative way. And let's remember, like as pregnancy help folks, we don't always sense and feel, and I appreciate your call out to that, Lisa. We don't always sense and feel the connection correctly with our friends on the sidewalk that are really that direct interaction, because that's very confrontational. Sometimes it's more than what some of us who are in the centers or maternity homes really see ourselves doing, but they are a last defense against those that are about to make that decision for abortion. And so they are part of the pregnancy help spectrum, because pregnancy help happens everywhere. It happens in medical offices. Like back in the day, like in the beginnings of the pregnancy help movement, it was our pro-life doctors and nurses who were encountering people who were struggling with an unplanned pregnancy, and they were every part of pregnancy help then, and they're still part of it now, whether it happens in the sidewalk or the center, whether it's on the mobile unit or the maternity home. This is all part of the pregnancy help spectrum.
This makes me think a lot too of what we are witnessing overseas. Because I completely agree. It's an intimidation factor. And what we've seen overseas is sidewalk counselors literally arrested for silently praying outside of abortion clinics. And we know like those have been overturned, but it shouldn't have been a fight that even needed to be had, let alone moving over to abortion pill reversal. And the doctors who were their licenses removed, again, they win ultimately when they push back and show like we're using the tools of the medical industry to help these women and provide care, actual health care to these women in need. So when we see this symbol of we're going to use the SWAT team and arrest you pro-life advocates for simply praying, it is an intimidation factor, but we can also learn that if we stand true to what we're doing, we persevere, I take the experiences of what we're seeing in the UK and standing up and continuing to hold true to the truth. Justice does prevail. It just takes time and effort and energy, of course. But this was a beautiful symbol of hope and just seeing the pictures. I mean, it was across the spectrum of ages, races, everything of these 23 individuals who'd been arrested. And now this was a beautiful moment, I think, for the movement as a whole, and just that inspirational, okay, we're moving forward. We're getting past this. We've overcome this.
Yeah, Andrea let out a tidbit there. She was talking about Dr. Kearney in the UK and what he faced. And he, by the way, if you want to really hear that story, he did our keynote at our conference a while ago, and that'd be a great story for you to catch up with, because that's an amazing story of triumph in someone who is doing abortion pill reversal.
So that's a great segue with that bit of hope identified by Andrea to our next question for Jor-El. Big tech has been cozying up to this new administration, which has made a lot of people's jaws drop, just a teeny bit. What, if anything, have we seen in regard to online censorship regarding abortion? What do we think this means?
Yeah, well, we saw something really interesting before the inauguration happened, and we could see all of the big tech moguls up on the stage with the VIPs at the inauguration. We actually had our busiest abortion pill reversal month ever. And it was December, which is not classically our busiest month of the year. And so it's like we were like, wow, something's going on. Well, all of this stuff, it seems to be, and it's hard, as you know, it's hard to kind of know for certain what's happening with the algorithms and things, that we can't see, particularly for those that are not particularly technically savvy like me. We can't see all of those things, but we can sometimes see evidence of how things are changing. And I don't know if it was the election or if it was Elon Musk and X, Twitter changing, that's created things. What we feel we are seeing is that there are two aspects to what we believe has been happening, what we know has been happening, what we believe has been happening for APR in particular, right? So we have seen both obvious censorship, no, you cannot place this ad for that particular thing, and that's a whole story by itself, which I know you've written on many times, Lisa. But we've also seen a suppression of search, like where we were not coming up. Even if you typed abortion pill reversal straight up, which is all over our website, we were not getting the kind of organic So we feel like some things were going on that was suppressing that. Well, what we think is happening is that the suppression is easing. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. May that continue. But the censorship is still in place, and we've been testing it. We've been, trying to find, where, if anywhere, is there new opportunity. I know Andrea's been really busy trying to kind of explore that as well.
Yeah, so going on with that is that within a couple of days in January, we saw Facebook start to grow rapidly, the number of followers. And then to your point, Jor-El, for abortion pill reversal, it had actually gone up to number 2 when searching on Google, just in the organic search results, where it hadn't been for quite a while. So the fact that we're seeing that easing is very affirming. Now, we are still, to your point, overcoming a few different challenges. And we are hopeful that the easing continues in regard to the censorship. But we are going to continue to follow that element, follow it, report on it, and share it with the pregnancy help movement, and write on it as it is pertinent to the general population as well. Because whatever we see, we want to be certain that the pregnancy help organizations are aware, so that they can tap into the same tools and get the best ratings that they can to enhance the reach in order to connect with women the best that they can as well. But it's been really fun to watch, because in my department, we're looking at the organic and the paid ads. We're looking at social media. We're looking at search results. We're looking at it all. And it's been very, very fun to see the numbers grow, because that just extends the reach to connect with more women in more communities and serve more families.
And I know we've been talking about political things, but we really, and this is part of the political reality, is the big tech has put their thumb on the scales in favor of abortion. And I know, really, we often don't want to have to rush in and advocate, but we have to, because that's the environment that we're dealing with. You may not be interested in politics. Politics is interested in you, as Pericles said, or Cicero, one of those ancient Roman general guys. But the reality is, at our hearts, really what we want is just a chance to compete. We know we have a good product. We have the product of the gift of life that God has given us. We have the power of the Holy Spirit, and we have the love of God that's working in us. And so we just want a chance to compete with them for her heart and her attention. And unfortunately, the people in power have been tilting the playing field. The Biden administration has done this. Big tech has done this. Certainly, the abortion industry tries everything they can to do this against us, and that's what we have to constantly work in. So we're always delighted to see when a little bit of the playing field comes back in our direction.
Well, and that's an excellent point, because a lot of folks remain somewhat skeptical of President Trump and his positions and stances, but I think that playing field element is something that we can count on there, and that makes all the difference in the world. Because if we can't be out there fighting for her heart, like you say, then we're done. We can't do anything. So it's that is crucial. There has been so much happening, and it keeps happening quickly. We have just barely touched the surface here, and more is going to keep coming. So I just wanted to ask you both here with our first post Trump inauguration session here, what your biggest takeaway is for those working in the pregnancy help centers and the pro-life movement as a whole, and then also how can we continue to build on this momentum?
So what was really kind of interesting that happened on day one actually wasn't directly connected to the pro-life movement or pregnancy help movement, but can have very long-term effects, which will be fantastic if things go out the way that we hope. And that was an executive order that was signed again on day one that was defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to federal government. In this executive order, they note that human life begins at conception.
Twice. Didn't they say it twice?
Yes, because they identify both male and female, and both are affirmed at conception. Biology, who knew? But anyway, this came across our screens because we follow and keep an eye on the abortion industry, as I do encourage you to do from time to time, or at least tap into Pregnancy Out Podcast, because we'll keep you up to date.
If you can stand it.
It's good in tidbits. But yeah, there is a woman named Jessica Valenti who literally has a site that's called Abortion Every Day. She literally writes about abortion every single day. And she called this out as an alarm to the abortion industry. And so the fact that they were noticing that, the government is saying that life begins at conception was a huge red flag for them, that she was calling all hands on deck. We need to push back. We need to call our senators and congressmen and tell them to just vote against anything that is affirming this. Thankfully, this is an executive order. So now it is up to the legislators to put into law, but it could have great long-lasting impact if we do get conception written into U.S. law.
So, Jor-El, do you have any thoughts on how this may or may not impact personhood?
I sure do. Like there's language here that suddenly gets very interesting when you connect it to the 14th Amendment, which of course is where the personhood conversation goes. And while if you're like me, I watch with dismay how the Republican platform was handled back in the towards the end of the summer as the convention was coming, and there was this they broomed a bunch of things from that, which was very distressing because there's a lot of good language about family and things, and certainly some pro-life positions that we were sad to see, very distressed at seeing removed from the platform. But the primary thing that they did hang on to was a commitment to the 14th Amendment. And that's in the 14th Amendment is where the conversation about personhood and the personhood of the unborn come. And of course, when you have an administration that is now anchoring a key principle of biology and kind of immutable characteristics that go back to conception, you now have a very interesting declaration and statement potentially that could be leveraged for the 14th Amendment and the whole personhood construct. So I can't say that really means anything. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. But it is very interesting to have that language come out so strongly in an executive order on behalf of the administration that could very well be a signal. It certainly was for as Andrea called out, it was for the abortion industry. Like suddenly they were very concerned about that, and like, why are they paying attention to it? Well, if they're paying attention to it, we certainly should be, because it's a far more powerful declaration than just within the context of that executive order, which is really aimed at the transgender conversation. So it's very interesting for us to watch. We trust that there's more kind of key components like that. I suppose that will be dependent upon who gets confirmed in key positions, as we're watching some of those already in the last week. That might be for our next, what happened in the second 10 days of the Trump administration, because information is fast and furious. It's been an adventure to kind of keep up with. I'm grateful for Andrea and others, Lisa, you as well, keeping tabs on those things. It's been so many interesting things going on. It's going to be a very, very interesting year ahead, and maybe 2, maybe 4 years as well.
Well, we had to skinny this down so much just to get this session in. So I'm excited to have further conversations because it's just going to keep coming.
For sure. So a lot has happened. A lot will continue to happen, and we will bring it to you one way or the other through Heartbeat, the Pregnancy Help podcast, Pregnancy Help News. So this was just the beginning, and we will be back with more. I am Lisa Bourne, managing editor of Pregnancy Help News. I've been joined by Jor-El Godsey, president of Heartbeat International, and Andrea Trudden, vice president, communications and marketing. And with that, we will bring it back over to Dawn.
Thank you, Lisa, for helping us sort through so many updates and big changes, and for Jor-El and Andrea helping us to unpack the implications of some of them for our listeners. With so many changes happening in just a few days, I hope you, our listener, are subscribed to the Pregnancy Help podcast, as well as Pregnancy Help News, to stay up to date on the latest stories, news, and information affecting pregnancy help organizations in the U.S. and around the world. And we hope you'll continue to stay tuned. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.